Third video of the Freak Attack series against the Najdorf variation of the Sicilian Defense. In this video, we are going to see a game between Magnus Carlsen and Sanan Sjugirov in Chess 24 Banter Blitz 2020. Carlsen had the white pieces and started this game with pawn to e4, and Sjugirov replied with Sicilian Defense, and here we have the Najdorf variation. For this game, Carlsen had a surprise and he played rook g1, the Freak Attack. He wants to push the pawn to g4. I guess he wanted to deviate from the main lines and to surprise Sjugirov. Sjugirov replies with the most typical move, pawn to e5. This is a typical Najdorf move. In the previous videos, we analyzed pawn to h5 and pawn to b5. Make sure to watch those videos. Sjugirov replied with pawn to e5. Magnus retreats, and here a very surprising move and a very peculiar move by Sjugirov. He plays bishop to g4. I tried very hard, but I didn't understand this move. Why bishop to g4? Magnus replied with bishop to e2, and he retreats his bishop to e6. Why to include bishop e2? Bishop e2 is a developing move for white, and I don't know what he had in mind, because okay, he could have just simply placed bishop e6 in one go, and this is a totally fine move. He wants to push the pawn to d5. I'm very surprised by bishop g4. Actually, against bishop g4, white can also place pawn to f3, and if black plays queen b6 attacking the rook on g1, white doesn't have to play rook h1, and he can simply take the bishop, a very great move, and after queen takes g1, you can play pawn to g5, attack the knight, and if the knight retreats, you put your knight on d5. You want to play knight c7 check, you want to play something like bishop e3 or h3 bishop e3, and to catch this queen on this king side. So this is very scary for black, and it's actually losing. So bishop g4 doesn't make sense for me, and Carlsen simply plays bishop e2, bishop e6, and he develops his other bishop to e3. White wants to play queen d2, g4, g5, long castle, and attack the black king. In the game, Sjugirov plays bishop to e7. Okay, that's an okay move, and here Carlsen starts the attack with pawn to g4. The main idea of the Freak Attack, he wants to push these pawns and he wants to attack this king and this king side. Here it's a very crucial moment for black. Black in this position have to play pawn to d5, whether it's good or bad, because in the game Sjugirov plays pawn to b5, and after g5 his position is hopeless. He should have played pawn to d5 in this position, and I guess Magnus would have taken, knight takes d5, knight takes d5. Queen takes d5 is not a good option, because after queen takes d5, bishop takes d5, white simply plays castle. This bishop is under attack. If he goes back, if he takes on b3, he takes b3, two bishops in the endgame is a very great advantage. If the bishop goes to c6, white plays knight a5 and attacks b7 and c6. White is maybe winning in this position. And after bishop e6, white can put his knight on c5, and after take, look at these two bishops and look at this diagonal. White is completely dominating in this position. So this is not possible, but he could have played bishop takes d5, and after queen d2, knight c6, long castle. I know that white is better, but for example something like bishop e6, knight c5, white is better, but it's not over. It's not over, and black can still hold on. Compare this position, I just want to mention this, compared to this position with first bishop e6. If Sjugirov had been playing bishop e6 in one go, and if for example bishop e3, bishop e7, g4, now he can play d5, and after all of these things that we saw, for example, I don't say that he's forced, but for example, if this variation happens, then black can simply put his bishop on f3, because the bishop is not on e2, and he can simply place bishop f3, and this position is okay for black. This is a normal position and maybe a very balanced position for black. Against bishop e6, you can also, again, if your opponent plays bishop e6 in this position, you can simply place pawn to g4, or something like even queen e2. You can even play queen e2 to in later positions. After e takes d5, knight takes d5, you can play bishop d2. You want to play long castle, you can take on e5. You can also play bishop e3, you can also play g4. All of these moves are good, but a very surprising decision by Sjugirov. And here we have b5, and Magnus pushed the pawn to g5, and now he has a clear positional advantage. He has control over the d5 square. Magnus puts his knight on d5, which I guess is a very completely good move. Chess.com says bishop g4 was better. Of course, black cannot take this bishop because after this, look at these white squares. White is completely dominating on the white squares. If knight f8, white can simply play something. Now he can play knight d5, or he can also play h4, then knight d5. White is very better, much better in this position, but after knight d7, Carlsen plays knight d5. It's completely okay. Knight c5, Carlsen takes, and another great move, pawn to a4 to break the queen side. I don't know why chess.com says this is an inaccuracy, because it might be that it's on lower levels. This is a very great move and it attacks the queen side. The queen side now is falling apart. If he plays b4, white he puts his bishop on c4, and look at this diagonal, look at the white squares, and black has only this bishop to defend these light squares. White will simply place pawn to h4, plays queen to d3, castle. Well, I guess white is even winning in this position. So he plays pawn to a4, Sjugirov took, pawn to c3, castle, queen takes a4, bishop takes d5, e takes d5. Sjugirov here plays bishop d6. I guess he should have tried his best and he should have taken the pawn. I know that after this move, this is a very scary position, for example, after bishop c4, but okay, black can play queen c6. I don't know, if I'm white, I will play queen b3. Even queen takes c6 is good, but queen b3, this bishop is a monster. White is completely better. He wants to push the pawn to g6 and he wants to attack along this diagonal. White is completely better, but you never know, maybe black had some chances. But in the game, he plays bishop d6, pawn to h4, the storm is coming, pawn to h5, queen comes to g4. Here white could have played something like even bishop g4 was stronger, but Magnus wanted to transfer the queen to the king side. He played queen takes a4, and now he is transferring the queen to the king side, and he wants to checkmate the black king. Sjugirov tries his best. He plays pawn to e4. He wants to complicate the game. He wants to push his knight to e5. If he had taken on b2, white can play g6 in this position. White can also take on a6, but I guess Magnus' idea was to push pawn to g6. And I don't know, after h6 white has lots of ideas. For example, bishop takes h6 even in this position is working. So I don't know, white has a crashing attack in this position. So Sjugirov plays pawn to e4. He wants to put his knight on e5. Nevertheless, Magnus plays pawn to g6. He wants to take on h7 and checkmates black. If black takes, white will simply recapture, and if he, for example, plays something like f5, queen h5, it will be just checkmate in some moves. Of course, knight f6 exists. Queen h3 is better because queen h5, knight f6, but queen h3 wants to play here, and if knight f6, rook h1, this is just checkmate. So black is completely hopeless. In the game, he plays pawn to h6, and here comes a very interesting surprise. Bishop takes h6. Chess.com says it's not the best move, and he should have taken on f7, and rook takes a6. This is also good, but there is nothing wrong with bishop h6, and I will give this move also in an exclamation mark. This bishop takes h6 is a very great move, and in the game, Sjugirov plays knight d5, which was a bad move. He could have played f5, but okay, after f5, white can play queen g5. If you take queen takes h6, this is just game over. Knight f6, g7. White wants to checkmate. If queen e7, once again g7 with the idea of queen h8, it's just over. So, and in this position, if black here takes here, then white is checkmating black very easily. I guess with queen e6 check. Of course, this is a checkmate. So, but in the game, after bishop takes h6, Sjugirov plays knight d5. White takes on f7, rook takes f7. This is a very complicated position, but better for white because black king is weak. White has two bishops. This bishop is working very fine. It protects both of these two squares. This rook is working. Here, Carlsen didn't play the best move. Maybe queen takes e4 was the best move, and white has a very great advantage. But also queen e6 is also good. He wants to take on g7 with check. And here, Sjugirov made a final mistake in this position. He should have played king h7, and after king h7, the game is very complicated. White can retreat with his bishop, but he can also take on g7, and after rook takes g7, queen f5 check. And I don't know, for example, after this, look at this position. I'm not sure what's going on in this game. Computer says it's equal, but white has lots of chances. He wants to take on e4, he wants to push, and he has lots of checks. This rook is working. Black is in great danger, especially in a blitz game. It's very hard to play this position with black pieces. But white can also play just bishop b3, and if, for example, something like rook takes b2, white can play pawn to h6, and once again the black king is in big danger. So this doesn't happen after queen e6. Sjugirov plays king f8, and here Carlsen simply takes the pawn on a6. He attacks the bishop on d6, and Sjugirov plays rook b6. But in this position comes the very brilliant move by Magnus Carlsen. Here he sacrifices his rook with rook takes g7, a brilliant move. He wants to take on f7, so black cannot take on a6 because after rook takes f7 it's game over. In the game, black took, bishop takes g7 check, king takes g7, and rook a7 check. This rook joins the party, and here, okay, queen c7 was the only try to avoid checkmate, but it drops the queen. He plays king to h8, queen to h6 check, and after king g8, queen to g7, checkmate by none other than Magnus Carlsen. This was a very beautiful game, I guess. I hope you enjoyed this video and this game, and if this is the case, please like the video and write your comments and thoughts below this video, and please subscribe to my channel. Enjoy chess and life.